Hello YouTubers, welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to talk about foundation services. In our previous sessions, actually we started talking about the software architecture, after which I explained the low-level architecture in details, and then we had a session with our brother Abdus Samad, who explained the brokers, right? This is basically was the first layer in the low-level architecture. And today I would like to talk about the services. And like the first service is the foundation service, which basically talks to a broker, right? Let me actually share my screen and start drawing and kind of trying to explain the foundation service. As we talked in the previous sessions, right? The first thing in our low-level architecture is exposure, right? Which is controller, and the exposure talks to a service, right? Which is green in here, and the service basically talks to a broker, right? In here, and the broker is basically um, the layer which talks to external systems. For example, it can be a database, right? A database. Okay, so we already covered with you the brokers, right? In the previous session, our brother Abdusamad explained in details and also he wrote some code. Today I would like to talk about the services. We know that there are different types of the services, right? So there is not only one service which covers everything, but there are different types. For example, the foundation, like I would say, the simplest, the service which just talks to a broker, it may have some mappings or just simple logic in it, but not the heavy logic. In like simply saying, foundation services are the first business layer above the brokers, right? So the foundation services talk to brokers. Also, we have a processing service for more complex logic, and we have orchestration service, right? In order for us to be able to like orchestrate different services, right? If we have very complex logic, if we want to talk to multiple entities and make some uh, logic between them and combining in one service, definitely in that case we are going to need the orchestration service. But today we are going to talk about the foundation service. In here, let me say foundation service, right? Okay. Basically, as I told, the foundation service is like the first business layer about the brokers, right? The main responsibility of the foundation service is just to call the broker and make sure that the value, the incoming value, is being passed to broker, and what the broker returns is being basically returned, right, to the above logic. For example, to a processing service, or it can be just a controller which calls this foundation. Usually, like controller, foundation, and broker is like for CRUD operations, right? We just call the add or we call the retrieve all. We are not doing any logic. We are just retrieving data, adding data to the database. So in this case, like we probably may need to have just the foundation service, right? Without having the processing or the orchestration, because this is just a CRUD operation. Okay, or like uh, like what the foundation services do in details. I would explain that first they talk directly to the brokers, right? They talk to the brokers. So in here I can basically add in broker here, right? So the foundation services they talk to the broker, and also the foundation service they may contain some like simple business logic. It can be just mapping, for example, a broker may return an object which is an external object, right? Now, an object which comes from the external system, and we will definitely need to map that external object to a local model, to the local object, which is going to happen in this foundation service, right? So, like simple logic. And then the second thing, like the third foundation service, uh, needs to validate data, the incoming data, make sure that the data, the incoming value, right, which is being passed to the foundation service is validated, that it's not null, that it's not invalid. Also throw exceptions, right, handle exceptions, um, and basically I would say that's all, right? But what they don't do, the foundation services, they shouldn't do, they shouldn't orchestrate multiple brokers, right? Unless there is a utility broker, as we discussed in the previous video. For example, we may have a foundation service talking to a storage broker. At the same time, the service can talk to a datetime broker and the login broker. The datetime broker and the login broker are the utility brokers, right? So we can call them in any services. It doesn't matter because these brokers are the utility brokers. But I cannot go and call the storage broker and the authentication broker in the same foundation service because the storage broker and the authentication broker are not the utility brokers, right? So like this is what the foundation service shouldn't do. Call multiple brokers, not utility brokers. Uh, Also, foundation services shouldn't contain heavy calculations, like heavy business logic in them, because for that we have a processing service, right? And yeah, that belongs to the processing service, and mostly like this is about the foundation services. Let me specify what we really need for this foundation service. For foundation services, the foundation services need to contain, like, need to be tested, right? So calling the broker, it's already a logic, right? We are calling the broker, we are passing a value, and we are getting a value back. So the foundation services, they need to have a test. Let me say unit test, right? Unit test. There are three um, types of the tests that the foundation services need to have. The first one is a logic test, right? Is a logic test. This is the pass-through. Just to We need to have a test, right, which tells us, like, which tests our foundation service logic, just the pass-through. Okay, the foundation service is supposed to call a broker, and the broker is supposed to return this value, for example. Just the first is the logic test, right? Uh, the second, the second is validation, right? The second test is the validation test. The foundation service, like actually all services, but now we are talking about the foundation service, they will require to have the validation test, right? If there is a need, definitely. For example, if there is a foundation service which contains a method which doesn't take any values, any inputs, doesn't have any inputs, right? It just retrieve all, right? So in this case, we don't need the validation because we don't have any inputs, right? So, but if there is a method, for example, retrieve a user by ID, right? And an input value is user ID, definitely in that case, we will need to validate like the method in the foundation service. And the third test is the exception, right? Foundation service needs to have exception tests. Why? Because our broker is going to our broker may error out, may throw exceptions. And this is basically the place, foundation service, where we are supposed to handle the exception from this broker, right? We are supposed to handle the exceptions from this broker. Okay, basically we have this logic test. This is the first, the most important is the logic, then the validation, right? If we need the validation, and the exception tests. Basically, regarding the tests, that's all. The foundation service needs to be tested, like the methods which are in the foundation service, they are going to be tested, right? And the unit test is very like the testing our services, our methods is very important because this is how we know if our logic is working as we expect, right? If everything is handled like the validations. For example, if an empty ID is coming, right, from a client to our backend system, right, we need to know we shouldn't allow that empty ID basically to go to our broker, to our database, right, and eventually error out with 500, and then we don't know like what was the reason. But if we have this validation test, right, and we validate that there is an empty ID coming, we know that this is the validation exception, and we throw the validation exception, which means that at the exposure layer, we are going to catch the validation exception and return the 400, right? Which makes it very easy for the client to know what was the reason, right? And like for the engineers as well, later on for the debugging. Basically, I think that's all regarding the foundation service. Now I would like to write some code and show how it actually is going to look. I'm not going to write tests in this video because it may take a very long time. I would probably I would probably have a different video for the unit testing, like for all of us first to be able to understand what the test is, right? How to start writing just the simple test, right? And when we know how to write simple unit tests, after that, basically we can go and try to write the logic test for a foundation service and then the validation and then exception, right? Because the foundation service task is like, I would say, the most simplest, right? On top of the foundation service, there is a processing service, there is an orchestration service that like basically the task and the logic itself is going to be much more complex, right? So today I will just write this. I wanna show these two examples in the code how they're going to look. I will start from building a broker. Let's start. I wanna build like a simple file broker, right, for writing, let's say, writing a text into a file, right? And then I will show how the foundation service is going to look and how it's going to talk to the broker. Okay, let me open basically my Visual Studio. Here I have it. I created a demo project, architecturedemo.core, and here I'm gonna go and create a folder for our brokers, right? Let me give it a name, brokers. And since I'm going to create a file broker, then I'm gonna call name my folder files under the brokers. And here I will go and create a file uh, I. So first is the interface, I file broker, right? So this is an interface, and let me create a class for it, file broker. All right. In the interface, I'm gonna create a method for us so we can initialize in our class. So it's going to be just the value task, and let's say write text async, right? And this is going to basically take the path, right? And then the content itself, because we need to specify, we need to give the path of our file, string path, right? And then the string content. All right. Now I'm gonna go and call this interface in my broker, right? And implement the interface. All right. In here, let me make it asynchronous. Um, let's say now I need to basically write to this path, right, which I'm going to path later, the content, the incoming content. So it's going to be await file.write all texts async, and I basically provide my path and the content. So since my code is just one line, right, in my method, I can remove the scopes, right, and just use like this arrow to make my method look simpler, right? If there is only one line. Okay, so this is the broker. Like as you can see, this part is done, right? We just build a broker, like file broker. Very simple, very straightforward. We don't need any tests. We just need to make sure that our broker is talking to an external system. In our case, this is a file, right? This is a file. Okay, now I'm gonna go and create a services folder. I'm gonna create services in here, and under the services, I'm gonna go and say foundations because we may have different types of services such as foundations and processings, right? So in our case, it's foundations and one more folder, files. Why one more folder? Because we may have different foundation services like user foundation service, file foundation service, memory foundation service, and so on. And in here, I would call it, uh, let me create an interface, iFile service, and then file service, right? Okay, here I'm gonna go and call my interface, and inside the interface, let me create, basically it's a similar method, right? I will call it write content async, which is going to take string path and then the string content, right? Okay, and now let me initialize my method in here. Okay. All right. I have this method, but it doesn't have anything inside, right? So I need to be able to call that broker I just created, right? So as we talked before, as we discussed, the foundation service needs to talk to a broker, right? How do we make it to talk to a broker? Simply, we come here and basically by using the dependency injection, basically we say private read-only I file broker, right? We call the interface, right? And in our constructor, we initialize this file broker. Basically, file broker, right? And we say this file broker equals the file broker, right? Let me adjust this. Okay. All right. And in my method, I'm gonna say return. I don't need to say the return because our file broker basically doesn't return anything. It just writes the content to a path, right? I'm gonna say await this file broker and write text async. That's all. This is how we just made our foundation service talk to a broker. This is actually the main purpose of our foundation service. The main goal is to talk to a broker and basically make sure that uh, the method from the broker is being called, right? So when our foundation service is ready, then we basically can go and call it in our exposure, which is the controller. I think that's all regarding the foundation service. Now you can see this write content async method. It doesn't have any tests. It's just the pass through. And definitely later on, when we learn how to write unit tests, we are going to come back to the foundation service and try to write the logic test, try to write the validation tests, exception tests. But for now, I think that's all. I hope that it was clear and easy to understand. I think we have already covered two layers, which is the first one is the broker. Now we talk about the services, about the foundation service. I think that later on, like in the next sessions, I will try to talk about processing services and see if we can write some processing services, and also the same for the orchestration services. So we have an idea, right, of regarding the services, and after which we can talk about the exposure, which is basically a controller, right? That's all. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that this was beneficial for you, that you benefited from this video. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. See you soon. Bye bye.